Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you how to create a custom door schedule out of your project. And what this is going to entail is not only some of the fields that are already inside of Revit itself that are being offered inside of there, but also is going to show how to create new parameters for us to use to pick from inside of our project as well. So to get started, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go up to View. Something to remember that schedules are views inside of Revit. So when you go inside of View, you're going to go to Schedules, and you're going to click on Schedules, and say Schedules and Quantities. Inside of here, we're going to scroll down to Doors, and we're going to tell it OK. And here, all the parameters that are associated with doors are now located, excuse me, inside of here for us to pick from. So I've got quite a few different ones that I want to use. So the first one that I want to use is Mark. I'm going to go down to Mark. Now, door mark in the door schedule is the individual number that each door has. And so here's what I mean by that. If you had several rooms and with several doors, and then you mark them 1, 2, 3, 4, that is that mark. That's what it's looking for. It's the identifying character for that. So I'm going to click on Mark, and I'm going to pull it over. The next thing I want to do is, a lot of times with the door schedule, you want to know where that door schedule came from. You need, or where that door came from, so that's easy identification marker when someone is maybe installing the doors or adding hardware, so on and so forth. So I'm going to go up here to where it says Select Available Fields From, and I'm going to click on To Room. And what that essentially means inside of Revit, what To Room means is it is which way is the door swinging into, that's the To Room for a door. So I want to pull over the To Room name and the To Room number. That way I can make sure that when I'm actually naming these, because you can always go back and renumber doors, when I'm actually numbering my doors, I'm making sure that they match the numbers that go with the room number that I have them located in. So, and I'm actually going to take room number, I'm going to move it up, because I want to see those close by each other, so when I'm going to put the information in. Then I'm going to actually click on To Room name again, so I make sure that the next thing I pull over is right underneath that parameter. Now, that's just one start. What I need to do is I need to go back up here to Select Available Field From, and I need to go back to Doors. So I go back to my door parameters, and you'll notice that the information is now different. Inside of here, the next item I want to pull over, I'm going to pull over Type, but I'm not going to use it. And here's what I mean by that. Inside of Revit, most types for doors, especially the default doors that are built into the ready-made templates that they have, list door types out as two things, a width times a height. I know there are a lot of designers that like to number doors based off feet and inches, and they like to, or at least show that information when it comes to the type, and they like to show those things separate. So they like to show the width as one parameter, and they like to show the height as another parameter. So I'm going to add that in for right now, but I'm going to create 2 new parameters, because I'm going to use this information, this type mark, so I can know what to put in, and then I'm going to get rid of it. So I'm going to click right here where it says New Parameter, and it's going to pop up another dialog box where I have to actually put the parameter into the system. So in this particular case, like I said, I want to split up both my doors, my width and my height. So I'm going to call this first one Door Width. Okay. And this is technically a type parameter just because of the way that Revit does doors in their system. So I'm going to make that as a type parameter, and that way it'll actually kind of cut down on some time that I'm spending later trying to get this information into the system. The next thing I want to make sure I do is that the type of parameter is actually a text parameter, because I want to, not only do I want to have a a number inside the system, I may end up using parentheses or something else like that, and it's only going to, if I type in number, it won't allow me to put in any other symbols. So this is why I want to use text as the parameter. So from here, the other thing I want to make sure I do is I can decide where I want to group this parameter under, and since it's something that has to maybe do with dimensions of the door, we can put it underneath dimensions. After I put all this information in, I want to double check, make sure type of parameter is selected properly, because if I don't, and I want to go back and do something, I'll lose the parameter and I'll have to create it all over again. I won't be able to use it. So you always want to make sure when you're getting out of a selected or a created parameter that the type of parameter is in there properly. You don't accidentally mess that up and make it any other type of parameter that you cannot use. So I'm going to tell this okay. From here, I'm going to make another one, and I'm going to call this one door height. Same information applies to this one as with the last parameter that we just created. The type of parameter, it is a type parameter. It is a text parameter. Your type of parameter is text parameter. And let's see here. I'm going to group it underneath dimensions inside of the properties box so I can get a better idea of where things are. And that's it. I'm going to tell it, once again, check that that's text, and I'm going to tell it okay. After that, I'm going to want to put in the next thing, I guess, that's important to me is maybe the thickness of the door. The thickness of the door sometimes matters if you are doing any type of fire rating information. So you want to get an idea of how thick the panel is. And not only that, you want to make sure they're ordering the right size panel. Besides that, the next thing that I do want to put in, and that information is in here, is the fire rating. And that could be because you need to make sure that the door that you're putting into the system matches the assembly of the wall that it's going into. If you have a 3-hour partition that you're putting into a space, the door must also be a 3-hour door. So it's some good information that someone needs to know. So after I do all that, I'm going to move on to some of its physical items, like material items. So I'm going to go to finish, and this really essentially has to do with the finish of the panel of the door. And then after that, I'm going to actually move to, excuse me, my frame type. And a lot of times that is determined based off of a door legend and maybe, a door elevation showing different types of frames that go on the different types of doors. Besides the frame type, we also are going to want to know the frame material, because not always the material of the frame doesn't always match the material of the door itself. Let's see. Then after that, I may care about the undercut, and I don't see the undercut here. And the reason why we put undercut in is just to make sure that there's enough room made for different types of finishes, maybe from one room to another. The carpet's going to have a different thickness than a vinyl or a wood or something like that. So I'm going to make a new parameter again, and I'm going to call this one undercut. And in this particular case, I'm going to make this an instance parameter because, you may use the same type of door in many different spaces, but the undercut may be different because of the different materials that you're using. So I'm going to make sure that I have that one in there. So that's an instance parameter, the type of parameter. Once again, I'm going to do a text because I want to be able to write in the number. And we can either group that parameter underneath text, or once again, we can maybe go back to dimension, that type of thing, and put it underneath there. From here, I want to do I want to maybe give an idea of what the different hardware is that goes on the different doors. I mean, we know that's important because we need to make sure we have the right type of specs, and each door actually may have a different circumstance as far as the hardware goes. So once again, that is a new parameter, and I'm just going to say hardware. And what you can do is you can then tell inside of this schedule, you could tell it hardware set type 1 or something. And then you can have another list off to the side or another legend, which I can show you how to do, that then list out what that hardware set actually is consistent of. Some people like to break it down based off of and make the door schedule really long. This is if you're trying to save some room on your drawings. They like to break down every little piece. You know, what are the hinges? What numbers that go with the hinges? What's the lock set itself? What is the closer? Does it have a closer? Does it not? Does it have a kick plate? Does it not? Those different things. Does it have a panic bar on it? Those could be their own individual parameters if you really want to, but in this particular case, I'm just going to add it in as one hardware set. But I am going to make an instance parameter. I'm going to make sure that it is a text again, so I can make a decision on whether or not I want to put in a letter or a number. And now we're going to tell this okay. From here, after I want to do my hardware, if you are doing a interior renovation type project, maybe even one that particularly has LEED or something like that, and you're possibly pulling a door from an existing space in a project, you may decide that you want to take that door and salvage it. Not a problem. You just need to make sure, maybe you want to show that in the schedule so that they can make sure to save it later. So I'm just going to create a new parameter. This time I'm going to ask, is it salvaged or not? In this particular case, once again, it's going to be an instance parameter because I'm choosing to, in my schedule, show both existing doors and new doors for this particular case because of the salvage question. The type of parameter that this is actually going to be is a yes, no, meaning it's a check mark. Yes, check is for yes, left blank is for no. So it's going to be salvaged, yes, no, group parameter. And we can say other, or we can decide, hey, maybe it's a green building property, just depending on what it is that you're using it for. And if you want to create a little tip for yourself, and that's what you do when you click on Edit Tooltip, and you could say, check this box if the door is being saved for reuse later or is coming from a previous, or we'll say, or has been salvaged and meant for reuse during demolition. Something like that. Just a little note for yourself. And now I'm going to tell it, okay. I'm going to add in cost. And here's a great thing about cost, because cost is a type parameter and it comes from when you have actually installed the doors in. You may have a number there. Right now it's a type parameter. It could turn into an instance parameter if for some odd reason we have the same type of door, but it has different price because of different materials, so on and so forth. This may turn into a different type of parameter. We may end up having to create our own on this one. And last but not least, I always like to add in comments into my schedules because we always have to talk about something, right? Nothing is ever cut and dry and black and white. So make sure I put in comments there. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to move to filter. And in filter, this is where I was saying I could have put phasing in and decided to only show new construction versus old, or I could have decided to say, well, I only want to see doors that have this thickness or something like that. Right now, I'm not really making a decision. I don't have any filters to go off of, so we're going to leave this blank. And sorting and grouping, I definitely want to sort this thing based off of mark, because that usually is a number. And like I said, we want to make sure that things are coming up evenly and not confusing us as we're putting information in. And next from here, I'm going to put in, this is a formatting. You can set this up. I usually leave this alone and don't really touch this. But this is essentially shows like how your schedule reads. And in other words, we may want everything to read through the center of the line. We may not. We want to have maybe a different font. Maybe we're going to change the heading, so on and so forth. The only thing I'm actually going to touch inside of formatting here is I'm going to actually change the, I'm going to put a conditional format onto the salvage question itself. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to salvage, and I'm going to come over here to where it says conditional formatting. And what conditional formatting is it takes a look, it reads what has been reported inside of that parameter, and it takes that information and assigns maybe a code or something like that to it, so that it catches your information, catches your eye when you're going to look at your schedule and put some information in. So it's a pretty neat little tool. It can maybe do some testing for you, or so that you don't have to sit there and scour it yourself. So I'm gonna go to conditional formatting, and what it does is it brings up conditions in fields. It's the same thing as everything else. It's based off of how that is done. And I'm gonna tell it that I want to, if it's equal to yes, meaning that the box has been checked, I need to make sure that has a red flag, so, you know, because that could be maybe a potential cost saver, or it could be something where we want to make sure the door is actually grabbed when demolition starts, so on and so forth. So I put something on the radar. So if it says yes, I'm going to just put a little, like maybe a yellow, especially if you print in color now. I'm going to make that yellow so that, you know, it flags for everyone later on, maybe, hey, this is a door that's salvaged, you know, don't add it into the cost estimate, so on and so forth. So, you know, and that's just essentially what it's for. And so we're going to tell this, okay. And last but not least, I don't touch this part too much, especially if there's a default setup. Only time I touch it is if I'm maybe building a standard for a company that likes to use a certain font or something like that. Other than that, only thing I would maybe consider taking out is blank row before data, because that just adds in a whole lot more extra space on the schedule. And I know a lot of times with schedules, the real estate is premium, and schedules can get condensed if we can. So took the blank row out. I'm going to tell this okay. And I now have a schedule. Now, obviously, there's quite a bit of information I need to add into this thing before this thing is complete. But the good news is, like I said, we've started out the schedule already, so we can continue to go from here to do some things. You can come back through, you can type this information in, and it will not only will stay inside the schedule itself, but it will transfer back to the door. And now that the schedule is created, I'll just come over here and I'll show you how that conditional formatting works. I'm going to click on just any door, I don't care which one, and I'm going to actually hit yes, that is salvage, and you'll notice now that the field is green, or the cell is green. So that's how the conditional formatting works. You can have a color-coded schedule for many different things on your schedule, and it's used for not just printing off and use for construction documents, but it can also be used later on if you are doing databasing or building matrixing or anything like that for while it's in use. So that's it when it comes to schedules. If there's anything else that you would like to see with the schedule, maybe you want to question how you manipulate it or edit it or take something away, put something in, just let me know in the comments below. If you want to see something else, let me know that as well. And also don't forget to subscribe to the channel so that you can be up to date on any other videos that I upload. Thanks again.